There's no way for these to survive a single attack. If you ever lose 5 models at a time, the unit kills itself instantly. The entire unit dies. The idea of a Deadly Demise faction is so cool, but we need another run through, I think. What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and today we're doing something a little bit different. I was trolling around the Reddit Warhammer sphere and found what might be the wildest and most insane 40k homebrew. Now, the player who put this together actually assembled an entire 10th edition index using most of the established formatting and templating that the existing indexes have. But what is especially appropriate for something of the subject material that we're going to cover, this was basically like assembled by an unhinged madman. And reading through this index is like peering into an endless, tumultuous void of untamed madness. There's so much going on. Some of the ideas in it are super cool. Some of them are weird, but all of them are pretty gnarly and worth talking about. So let's dive into Warhammer 40k Index, Nayoshi Sun Eaters. Now, a little bit of a credit to the author before we get started in. This was created by Zuko's Tea Shop in r/homebrewhammer. Now, I'm not a lore meister, and I don't know if the Nayoshi Sun Eaters are something that exists within the 40k lore proper. I have a sneaking suspicion that they don't. The impression that I get from it, and some of it established just straight up by the art, is very kind of Hellraiser themed. They have a very parasitic kind of game feel. A lot of their stuff relies on making their own units worse to buff their other units, and they have so many mechanical sub-themes. It's a little bit wild. It's a little confused. It's trying to do several things, all of which independently are very cool, but I don't know if they all work together very synergistically. But we'll talk about it. So the first one, this Colonial Organisms army rule, gives all battle-shocked models Deadly Demise, including your own battle-shocked models, I believe, and enemy models also gain Deadly Demise as long as they're battle-shocked, with +1 to the Deadly Demise roll, which I believe is just +1 to trigger Deadly Demise. I think the intention is that it triggers on a 5. This is all models as well, so it will affect all your infantry. You're playing, you know, a million termagants. As soon as one of those units gets battle-shocked and you lose 30 of them or 20 of them in a unit, you have to roll 20 Deadly Demises to explode the rest of your army. If anything else is battle-shocked, those then Deadly Demise, and you have like this cool chain reaction you can do through your opponent's army. That's kind of rad. A little bit of a Deadly Demise sub-theme, and I love it. That's so fun and cool. Now, the other thing is that it has like a Battle Shock sub-theme. It takes a little bit of a cue from the Dark Angels index, where it checks, or it tries to battle shock itself to unlock its abilities, and it has a bunch of ways to battle shock its own stuff. So every time a unit in your army fails a battle shock check, which you're going to be forcing a lot of on yourself theoretically, not to mention the fact that your army probably largely has Deadly Demise, so it's going to be exploding itself, it's going to be killing your own models, and you'll be able to force battle shock checks naturally more quickly. Whenever a unit in your army fails a battle shock test, you select one enemy unit visible to them. That enemy unit also must take a battle shock test. If you have abilities that force battle shock checks on yourself and you can control when they happen, that's pretty powerful. The downside being that you have very little control over when this triggers, because you have to not just take a battle shock check, you have to also fail that battle shock check and have line of sight to an opponent. So a lot of variables have to sort of come together. In terms of a Battle Shock Matters faction, I think this does it better than a lot of the other ones, just in that it has a lot of ways to force battle shock on itself, and it has relatively low leadership characteristics. So you're going to be successfully battle shocking yourself a lot, which gives you benefits. Unlike something like Dark Angels, where it's a Battle Shock Matters faction that relies on battle shocking itself, but the entire faction is like high leadership Space Marine units, and they have no way of forcing battle shock independently of natural casualties. It means it's very inconsistent and weird, and most of the time you're just playing them for the other abilities, not necessarily the battle shock. And I guess the trade-off between these detachment abilities is that this one doesn't do anything for you if you are battle shocked. So this army, I think, is going to be like just largely terrible at holding objectives, because half your army is going to be OC 0 at any one time, which is, you know, it's pretty funny. We have some stratagems here. Some of them are a little funky. One of them gives you enhancements when you kill people, which is kind of cool. One of them adds +1 to your Deadly Demise. When you're you're moving casualties, there's a timing window between when you fail a save and suffer damage and when Deadly Demise resolves. I think that is supposed to be the timing window for this stratagem, and you use it to then give yourself +1 to activate your Deadly Demise damage explosions. One of them gives you saving throw rerolls for 2 CP as a battle tactic strat, and there is one way to get free battle tactic strats that I know of in the army. I haven't gone through every single datasheet like exhaustively, so there's probably combos in here that I'm not quite seeing. You also have this weird one, which I think is just borked. It starts with the phrase during the shotting of fight phase, which I think it means during the shooting or fight phase. I believe the intention, because this is it's talking about puppeteers, so when you fight, you target someone else that's in melee. I don't know why it triggers in the shooting phase, because the target of the stratagem has to be a unit that's within engagement range of an enemy unit, and the stratagem only lasts until the end of the phase. I don't entirely know what this is supposed to be doing, to be perfectly honest. I think it's supposed to be a fight on death, but even if it's a 3+ fight on death, it requires you to have a second unit that's fighting. So if you're using it in your opponent's fight phase and they've charged you, you can't use it against the target of the charge because you haven't fought yet. So you have to interrupt. You have to be charged by 2 units, interrupt, pay another CP to use the stratagem to then give yourself on a 3+. They stick around until they fight. Just make it a 2 CP fight on death. I think I understand like that there's a top-down thematic thing going on where one unit is supposed to be like guiding the other unit. It's very weird. We then have a 1 CP 5+ feel no pain, a la rapid regeneration, but it also improves existing feel no pains by 1, which is already sweet, and we have one that returns 2d3 models back into coherency. Basically stealing these from Tyranids, I guess, but there's a lot of Tyranid energy going on over here. We have some enhancements. One of them, you don't take Deadly Demise, which is kind of cute. One of them, you get a battle tactic for free. That's your 1 free battle tactic, I believe. You can reduce incoming damage to 0 the first time you fail a saving throw each turn, and there's a bunch of big monster characters that I think are really important, so you're probably taking those most of the time. Spoiler alert, nothing has the correct keywords to equip this enhancement as far as I can see. So that's cool. A little bit of an oversight there. That's okay. It's fine. Who needs all your enhancements? Just play with 3. And we're off into units. So I'll give a brief overview of what I think are the most important units in the composition here. And this one is the first one, the Metabolex. I don't know what any of these are supposed to look like, by the way. There's no pictures. There's just like this H.R. Geiger background texture. It's a T11 2+ save, no invuln, problematic, I think, for a T11 like big character, but you know, it is what it is. It flies, I guess, but it only moves 8 inches. Maybe a floatery kind of guy. It has a psychic power at the end of your opponent's fight phase. I think this is the typo from the Alaris Terminator datasheet, I think. Oh, this is end of the opponent's turn, not their fight phase. We copied the typo, but we didn't copy the template. I don't understand. Anyway, it's a 2+ psychic power. On a 1, you take D3 mortal wounds. On a 2+, you go into reserve. It doesn't care whether or not you're in engagement range, so he can just like pulse in and off, on and off the table, and then you gain deep strike. I think you're supposed to go into strategic reserve and then deep strike. It also then gives +1 to deadly demise rolls for all models within 6 inches. A little dangerous because that also means that they when they explode, they also deal damage to itself. So I'm actually, in hindsight, this thing actually just kills itself very quickly. All models within 6 inches of the Metabolex. So every single one is guaranteed to hit the Metabolex. And while the Metabolex itself is battle shocked, you also add +1 damage to them. So like 3 Deadly Demise 1s kills it if it's naturally battle shocked, right? If it's at 5 wounds and fails its battle shock check, 3 Deadly Demise 1s around it, which happen on a 5+ now, just straight up kill it. Maybe for the Deadly Demise Matters faction, we should have some of these have a feel no pain. Fortunately, it is a character, so it can equip the I don't take Deadly Demise damage enhancement. So that is good on one of them, but it has like a big D3+3 damage hammer, which I think is what you're going to take because the faction largely seems like they have trouble killing armor. I think you're supposed to Deadly Demise people to death, but I have no idea. The Moutivore, I love this guy. This guy I think is like an encapsulation of what we should be doing with the Deadly Demise Matters faction. Every time he would take mortal wounds or devastating wounds, adds +1 to his Deadly Demise ability. So he's a 12 wound monster. If you like shoot him with an Onslaught Gatling Cannon and you shoot him 4 devastating wounds, right? Those are individual instances of devastating damage. So he would add +4 to Deadly Demise. If anybody Deadly Demises around him, each one of those adds +1 to his Deadly Demise. And then when he explodes for base D6 plus whatever this has added up to. So So as your army's dying around him and exploding, he's powering up. Downside is that what's going to happen, 100% of the time what's going to happen with this guy, and I don't know how many points they are. I hope they're extremely cheap. What's going to happen with these guys 100% of the time is that they're going to run up into the middle, going to add a bunch of deadly demise to themselves from your army exploding, and then they're going to roll a 1 on their deadly demise or whatever, and it's not going to trigger. Cool if these things just triggered it automatically, or you chose whether to trigger it. That would be cool. What's going to happen is you're going to get yourself to like this is super cool, like deadly demise d6 plus 3 or whatever, d6 plus 4, and then he's not going to explode. Or he's going to explode and everyone's 6.1 inches away. There's so much counterplay to this index. It's such a cool idea, but I don't know if anyone will take damage from this ever. The Darmex is another one. Gets a little bit weird. So it's a kind of a horde infantry, 10 to 20 models. You get +1 to deadly demise rolls for each model in the unit that dies, which means that 5 models in, the unit kills itself instantly, right? There's no way for these to survive a single attack. As soon as you get to +5 on your deadly demise, they automatically trigger. So if you ever lose 5 models at a time, including your own deadly demises, the entire unit dies. I like the idea. They need some way to prevent their deadly demise from triggering. The idea of a deadly demise faction is so cool, but we need another run through, I think. Now, I'm adding this in after the fact. I think this is another instance that you're supposed to use the Exterminatus cloak. That would prevent the unit from killing itself with its own deadly demise, but it also means that your Metabelex doesn't have it. So if you're taking one of those guys, which I think you kind of want to combo the two together, then he just dies instead. I think we need multiple places to be able to put that Exterminatus cloak ability for this whole synergy to work. Now, there's another horde unit in the faction, the Jiroxi horde. Every time 5 of them die, the unit that destroyed it takes a battle shock test that can also affect your own models, right? If you deadly demise the 5th one, then you can battle shock check whoever deadly demised them to then trigger your battle shocked synergies. But I think generally speaking, these guys are supposed to run up forward and force your opponent to kill them to then force a bunch of battle shock checks on them, which I think is cool. I like this ability. They also infiltrate, so they're up in the front. They're like screening your opponent's front line with 30 models, and you're like, well, I have to kill them, and if I do, then I take 1 billion battle shock checks, which is probably fine, but if they're cheap and basically a throwaway, then it's okay. They're also OC2. It's kind of insane, actually. You had 30 OC2 infantry like infiltrating on you, and it's like, well, good luck ever having objectives. That could get a 5+ feel no pain, don't forget. So the other sub-theme, there's 3 sub-themes, and there's Fortifications matter. This is the 3rd one. It kind of meshes with the battle shock stuff. It creates these Nyx pillars, which is super cool. This index is like actually sweet. This is another little bit of this homebrew that I really like because it has this theme of like engineering and constructing stuff and sort of taking over the battlefield. The problem with this, I don't know the timing of it. Is it supposed to happen when you make a battle shock check, or do you just do it at any time? It needs some sort of trigger to make this happen. You take a battle shock check. If you pass a battle shock check, including not only that one, and your leadership 6, which is okay, but there are stuff that reduces your own leadership, so they're probably rolling a 7. So it's like a coin flip to get the check off. Every time you pass a battle shock check, you build a Nyx pillar. So what is a Nyx pillar? So these are buildings. They're vehicle monster buildings, apparently. Some biotechnology, I guess. They're 7 wound T6 stuff. They're not that hard to kill. They're OC5 randomly. They can steal objectives like really, really, really well. They give everything stealth within 6, including themselves, which is kind of sweet. And then every time the Nyx pillar makes a battle shock check, they have the same ability that the Hades engineers do. They build another Nyx pillar. You're constructing these fortifications, and they're stealing objectives away from your opponent when you make battle shock checks. And if you can force enough battle shock checks on yourself, you can continuously build them across the entirety of the table. They just have to be outside engagement range of enemy units, which means that a Nyx pillar failing 2 battle shock checks contests an objective controlled by 10 OC of enemy units. What a cool thing. And it's not automatic, because it only triggers when you take battle shock checks. So it could be 0 Nyx pillars a turn, or it could be a bunch of Nyx pillars a turn if you force yourself to take a bunch of battle shock checks. That's super fun and sweet. So the Sadist is the other important sort of piece of the combination. He's a character leader. He goes into the horde units, I think. The Jiroxi hordes, yeah, and a bunch of the infantry, essentially. He reduces the leadership characteristic of each other visible unit by 1, including your own units. Eat your heart out, Neuro Tyrant. You fucking suck. The downside is that he's attaching to like relatively easy to kill infantry, and he has to be out in line of sight. But it's infinite range, so he can be in line of sight like in the back of your table edge, I guess, which is probably fine. Now, all the characters basically like feed into the Battle Shock synergies. This kind of sounds like a name, but I guess it's just a Nayoshi Kaluga. This guy, when you wound an enemy unit, you desecrate them. Well, they're desecrated, they have to retest a Battle Shock check in order to recover from Battle Shock. So it's kind of the way that people thought Battle Shock worked at the start of the edition, where Battle Shock normally at the start of your opponent's command phase resets back to normal, and then at the end of their command phase, if they're below half strength, they would have to retest again to see if they will pass. This one says if you fail at the beginning of the turn, you're battle shocked for another phase. If you pass that battle shock check and you're below starting or below half strength, then you flip it back, go to your battle shock step, and take another one. We then have some other stuff that triggers on battle shock. The Kdex battery. The Kdex battery is, I guess, it's a flying infantry. I guess they're like heavy weapon dudes. They have 5 wounds though. I guess this is like a obliterator kind of deal. Yeah, they're like obliterators probably. Oh, they have a smooth black hull. Smooth. When they wound an enemy unit, they blight it. So we can desecrate and blight someone. While you're blighted, you always count as being below half strength. So you can potentially shoot them with both the Kdex battery and the other guy, the Nayoshi Kaluga. If they battle shock from something else, right? They're battle shocked, they have to retest, but they automatically count as below half. So even if they pass the retest thanks to desecration, they then have to pass another one during the command phase like we just talked about. We have a lot of ways of mucking with Battle Shock on the opponent. Now, last but certainly not least, we have this fortification sort of sub-theme in here. We have a bunch of different ways to build Nyx pillars. I love this one. The Grazin Hiveworks has a psychic power. On a 1, it takes mortal wounds like normal. On a 2, it builds a Nyx pillar. It's also an OC10 fortification that's like T13, 16 wounds. I think this is what GW is a little bit afraid of with fortifications, where they were like, well, they're a stationary object that's probably going to be on your home objective. If we give them high OC values, they're just going to hold it for the entire game. I think OC10 might do that. Your opponent has to just discard capture enemy outpost if you have a Grazin Hiveworks in your list, because this thing will just sit there for the entire game. So while this homebrew is definitely, very homemade, again, a lot of your stuff is just going to kill itself immediately. The internal ecosystem of the faction is really cool. I like that a lot of its stuff like debuffs your own army for your own benefit, which is super cool. There's a mechanical identity and like a theme that I think is really interesting. From the mechanics of the units, it conveys the fact that the faction is meant to be this like parasitic faction. These are not nice people. So I've been pretty critical here of a bunch of kind of like mechanical nitpicks. I think the reason I wanted to talk about this is that it establishes that flavor so well that I really liked it. I think it's cool, and I hope you think it's cool too. If you do, let me know down in the comment section, but otherwise, that's gonna be it for the video. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Let me know if you like this kind of like off-the-cuff review stuff, but if you do, then maybe I'll do more. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Big thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are great. I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.